Good morning, friends. Today we have a talk on what are elementals, followed at noon by a continuation of our study of Patanjali's yoga aphorisms. Next Sunday at 11 a.m. on Google Meet, we will continue our study of the key to theosophy. The declaration of the UOT.
Sure, I can take it.
Okay.
The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of theosophy and the exemplification and practice of these principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all.
Thank you. Now, we'll touch on the fundamental propositions. We can, the first one, it's everything. Everything we can think of, plus stuff we can't think of, because that first fundamental goes beyond our human understanding. So it's called deity by some people. Dynamic energy, life, life, the air we breathe, and all the stuff that we can relate to, plus the elementals and all this stuff that we don't necessarily relate to, except for when we talk about the theosophy, and we know that all this is down in there, but we don't know that we don't pay attention to it. Most of us don't pay attention to it on a day-to-day basis. And anyway, so that is, I guess, that's it in a nutshell. The first fundamental is on deity. God is so he thought, speaking of the spiritualists or the religionists, but we know that this is an all-encompassing thing, and it's, like I said, it's far beyond what we can comprehend, but we can figure out some of the stuff by analogy and correspondence and so forth. The second fundamental is on the law, and that one we can figure out a good bit of, because it's the overall simple thing daily. Daily we have the day and night, sleeping and waking, and all those types of things, which we run into every day, and it's karma and reincarnation and all that's in there, and all the rules, if you will, the basic laws of nature. And the third fundamental is on evolution. That is a natural process marching, all of nature is marching ahead to a higher level of thinking, and at least up to the human level. And it's up to us after that. Once we go to the human level, we have to use our own self-induced and self-devised methods to advance further. And we, as humans, have a great effect on the all of nature, either negative or positive. So the way the student understands it, we are here to help nature, and nature is helping us too, because it is reminding us of things on a day-to-day basis, that we are here to help, and that's about it in a nutshell. Our devotional reading is from the Voice of the Silence. Thou hast, we're on page 55. Thou hast to be prepared to answer Dharma, the stern law, whose voice will ask thee at the initial step, hast thou complied with the rules, O thou of lofty hopes? Hast thou attuned thy heart and mind to the great mind and heart of all mankind? For as the sacred river's roaring voice whereby all nature's sounds are echoed back, so must the heart of him who in the stream would enter thrill in response to every sigh and thought of all that lives and breathes. Disciples may be likened to the strings of a soul-echoing finger, mankind to its sounding board, the hand that sweeps it to the tuneful breath of the great world soul, the string that fails to answer beneath the master's touch in dulcet harmony with all the others breaks and is cast away. So the collective minds of Shabakans, they have to be attuned to the Upataya's mind, one with the oversoul, or break away. Thus to the brothers of the shadow, the murderers of their souls, the dread, Dad Dukpa clan. Hast thou attuned thy being to humanity's great pain, O candidate for light? Thou hast, then thou mayst sinner. Yet as thou settest foot upon the dreary path of sorrow, till thou shalt first learn the pitfalls of thy way. So, if there are comments, we'll go on to our talk, which is titled, What Are Elementals?
Welcome, friends. Today there will be a talk on elementals, including some practical suggestions on incorporating this wisdom into our daily life. We'll begin with a quote from the Secret Doctrine, which sets the stage. HPB says in the Secret Doctrine that the universe is worked and guided from within outwards. As above, so it is below. As in heaven, so on earth. In man, the microcosm and miniature copy of the macrocosm, is the living witness to this universal law and to its mode of action. We see that every external motion, act, gesture, whether voluntary or mechanical, organic or mental, is produced and preceded by internal feeling or emotion, will or volition, and thought or mind. And the whole cosmos is guided, controlled, and animated by an almost endless series of hierarchies of sentient beings, each having a mission to perform, and who, whether we give to them one name or another and call them Dian Chohans or angels, are messengers in the sense only that they are the agents of karmic and cosmic laws. They vary infinitely in their respective degrees of consciousness and intelligence, and man, being a compound of the essences of all those celestial hierarchies, may succeed in making himself as such superior in one sense to any hierarchy or class or even combination of them. In the Theosophical Glossary, elementals are defined as the spirits of the elements. They have gone by other names throughout history. They were called by the Kabbalists gnomes, those of the earth element, sylphs, those of the air element, salamanders, those of the fire element, and undines, those of the water element. All the lower invisible beings generated on the 5th, 6th, and 7th planes of our terrestrial atmosphere are called elementals. They have also been called Peris, Devs, Jinns, Sylvans, Satyrs, Fauns, Elves, Dwarves, Trolls, Norns, Kobolds, Brownies, Nixies, Goblins, Pinkies, Banshees, Moss People, White Ladies, Spooks, and Fairies, etc. These elementals are rather forces of nature, and these forces are the servile agents of the learned occultist and may produce various effects according to the department of nature to which they belong. So an elemental is a center of force, without intelligence, without moral character or tendencies, but capable of being directed in its movements by human thoughts, which may, consciously or not, give it any form and to a certain extent intelligence. Elementals are attracted and vitalized by certain thoughts, depending to which class they belong. And all the elementals are themselves specialized completely within one or other of the elements, meaning those just mentioned, earth, air, fire, and water. And because these elementals are pure in their fiery, watery, airy, or earthly nature, they have an integrity of action that cannot be diverted for long. But because they are the lowest forms of life, just points of energy, they're guided and controlled and influenced by the thoughts and actions of more developed beings. And it's not easy to accurately convey the idea of the constitution of elementals, as strictly speaking, they're not beings like we typically think of a being. Theosophy indicates that there are many different classes of elementals for each plane of nature and for each division of each plane. Those pertaining to one plane do not really act in another. And it should be remembered that these planes of which we're speaking interpenetrate each other. So many elementals can never be recognized by men because one would need a certain level of clairvoyance to see them as they really are. But they can move with the speed and power of thought. They're energized by thought and act with the rapidity of thought. But acting as they do on their plane, as said, only a person with clairvoyance on one or some specific planes can see the sights properly belonging to the planes his or her development reaches to or has opened one up to. And so the elementals on those planes show to the clairvoyant only such pictures as belong to their planes. Other parts of the idea or thing pictured may be retained in planes not yet open to the clairvoyant. And it's for this reason that few clairvoyants know the whole truth. But an adept is one who has mastered all the lower forms of life as exist within himself and within his sphere, and as such could see all the elementals of the various planes of matter. And this is why many things well known about them can't be put into ordinary language. Some classes of elementals have a degree of intelligence of their own and a character, but they're far beyond our comprehension and ought to perhaps have some other name. But that class, which has most to do with us, answers the description given, that they act on their own plane and so forth. They are centers of force or energy which are acted on us while we are engaged in thinking and doing bodily motions. And we also act on them and give them form by a species of thought of which we really have no register of. For example, one person might shape an elemental so as to seem like an insect and not be able to tell whether he had thought of such a thing or not, because there's really a vast unknown country in each human being, which we really don't understand. And then it can take many initiations to fully reveal that knowledge. Can elementals be seen? What do they look like? In their simplest form, an elemental might be visible as, for example, like a disturbance in a transparent medium, such as would be produced by a glass fish, so transparent as to be invisible, swimming through the air of the room, and leaving behind a shimmer such as hot air makes when rising from a stove. But as to the moral character of elementals, they really have none. They are colorless in themselves, and they assume the tint or sort of the character of the person using them. And it's assumed that this tint could be from the person's aura. Elementals at the highest level are the most etheric divine elements that exist. They are sparks of the divine flame. And this is part of the secret teaching that is only comprehensible through initiation. Yet one can understand theoretically that the sons of Agni, the divine flame, are the highest beings in evolution, and that they released myriads of sparks of fiery intelligences, which then pari passu, with the differentiation of primordial substance, became the elemental world of nature. This process included the creation of a kind of elemental prototype of the human being, but one that will not consolidate or become self-conscious by itself. This has to await the descent of the Manasas. Still, other elementals remain permanently in the rarefied realm of Akasha, higher than the ether, let alone the lower astral light. And it is these hosts that Shelley intimated in his poetry. They are invulnerable, all-powerful, and omnipresent, it is said. It has also been said that some elementals can act in the fourth dimension of space. For example, take the tying in an endless cord of many knots, a thing often done at spiritist seances. Such a thing is possible to him who knows more dimensions of space than 3. And no 3-dimensional being can do this as we understand matter. It is impossible for us to conceive how such a knot can be tied or how a ring can be passed through the matter of another solid ring. Yet these things can be done by elementals. Commanded by the perfected human will, almost no act would seem impossible. And these are part of the explanation of so-called miracles and how they've been accomplished by great beings. They have such an intimate knowledge of the mind and nature, and possess the cooperation of the elementals, that seemingly impossible things can be effected. And it should be stated that the higher sovereign spirit in every man is the integrator of all the elements. And once this is perfected, one can command the elements, the weather, and perform such miracles. The production of phenomena, though, is not possible without the aid or the disturbance of elementals. Each phenomenon entails the expenditure of great force, and also brings on a correspondingly great disturbance in the elemental world, which disturbance is beyond the limit natural to ordinary human life. It then follows that as soon as the phenomenon is completed, the disturbance occasioned begins to be compensated for. The elementals involved are in a greatly excited motion and precipitate themselves in various directions. They are not able to affect those who are protected, but they are able, or rather it is possible for them to enter into the sphere of unprotected persons, and especially those persons who are engaged in the study of occultism. And then they become the agents in concentrating the karma of those persons, producing troubles and disasters often, or other difficulties, which otherwise might have been so spread out over a period of time as to be not counted more than the ordinary vicissitudes of life. And this will go to explain the meaning of the statement that an adept will not do a phenomenon unless he sees the desire in the mind of another adept, or another higher adept or a student, because then there's a sympathetic relation established, and also a tacit acceptance of the consequences which may ensue. It will also help to understand the peculiar reluctance often of some persons who can perform phenomenon to produce them in cases where we may think their production would be beneficial, and also why they are never done in order to compass worldly ends, as is natural for worldly people to suppose might be done, such as procuring money or transferring objects and influencing minds and so on. Switching gears to the idea of uninitiated persons using elementals, has been said that elementals have been affected by the twisted deceptions of the false ego, the lower personality enslaved by the lower passions. And eventually they'll wreak their revenge for having been misappropriated on behalf of the separative delusion of one form or another, and will result in ill health, mental sickness, or depression. Hence the reason why so many psychics go mad or suffer illnesses. So using them on behalf of some selfish end means that there's going to be like some sort of compensation for misappropriating them. And so the question naturally arises, is there not some connection between the karma of man and elementals? There is a very important one. The elemental world has become a strong factor in the karma of the human race. Being unconscious, automatic, and photographic, it assumes the complexion of the human family itself. In earlier ages, we may postulate that man had not yet begun to make bad karma, and the elemental world was more friendly to man because it had not received unfriendly impressions. But so soon as man began to become ignorant, unfriendly to himself and the rest of creation, the elemental world began to take on exactly that same complexion and return to humanity the exact pay, so to speak, due for the actions of humanity. Or like a donkey, when you push against, may push back. Or like a person, when anger or insult is offered, feels inclined to return the same. So the elemental world, being unconscious force, returns or reacts upon humanity as exactly as humanity acted towards it, whether the actions of men were done with the knowledge of these laws or not. So in these times, it has come to be that the elemental world has the complexion and action, which is the exact result of all the actions and thoughts and desires of men from the earliest times. And being unconscious and only acting according to the natural laws of its being, the elemental world is indeed a powerful factor in the workings of karma. And so long as mankind does not cultivate brotherly feeling and charity towards each other and the rest of manifestation, just so long will the elementals be without the impulse to act for our benefit. But so soon and wherever man or men begin to cultivate brotherly feeling and love for the whole of manifestation, then and there the elementals begin to take on a new condition. It is said that the elemental world interpenetrates this world and is therefore eternally present in the human system. As the elementals are automatic and like a photographic plate, all atoms continually arriving at and departing from the human system are constantly assuming the impression conveyed by the acts and thoughts of that person. And therefore, if he sets up a strong current of thought, he attracts elementals in greater numbers. And they all take on that one prevailing tendency or color, so that all new arrivals find a homogeneous color or image which they instantly assume. On the other hand, a man who has many diversities of thought and meditation is not homogeneous, but to say multicolored, and so the elementals may lodge in that part which is different from the rest and go away in a like condition. In the first case, it is one mass of elementals similarly vibrating or electrified and colored, and in that sense may be called one elemental. In just the same way that we know one man as Jones, although for years he's been giving off and taking on new atoms of gross matter. The next section is taken from a question and answer between a theosophical student and a sage. So these questions were written down and they're useful in helping us understand how the elemental world works. Question: if elementals are attracted and repelled by thoughts, do they move with the velocity of thought, say from here to Neptune? The sage replies, they move with the velocity of thought. In their world, there is no space or time as we understand those terms. And if Neptune be within the astral sphere of this world, then they go there with that velocity, otherwise not. So this suggests that we can maybe ascertain from this are confined to the astral sphere of this world. Question: what determines their movements besides thoughts, as when they are floating about the room? The sage replies, other classes of thoughts, certain exhalations of beings, different rates and ratios of vibration among beings, different changes of magnetism caused by present causes or by the moon and the year, different polarities, changes of sound, and changes of influences from minds at a distance can affect elementals. Question: when they're so floating about, can they be seen by anyone or only by those who are clairvoyant? Sage replies, clairvoyance is a poor word. They can be seen by partly clairvoyant people, but all those who can see thus by more people perhaps than are aware of the fact. Question: can they be photographed like the rising air from a hot stove can be? And the sage replies, not to their knowledge yet, but it isn't impossible. Question, what is their relation to light that makes it necessary to hold seances in the dark? Sage replies, it is not their relation to light that makes darkness necessary, but the fact that light causes constant agitation and alteration in the magnetism of the room. All these things can be done just as well in the light of day. If I should be able to make clear to you exactly what is their relation to light, then you would know what has long been kept secret, the key to the elemental world. This is kept guarded because it's a dangerous secret. No matter how virtuous one is, one could not, once the secret was known, prevent the knowledge from getting out into the minds of others who would not hesitate to use it for bad purposes. Question, will our scientific men one day then be able to use these elemental beings? And if so, what will be the manner of it? Will their use be confined only to the good men of the earth? Sage replies, the hour is approaching when all this will be done, but the scientists of today are not the men to get this knowledge. They are only the pygmy forerunners who sow seed and delve blindly into thoroughfares. They are too small to be able to grasp these mighty powers, but they are not wise enough to see that their methods will eventually lead to black magic in centuries to come. When elemental forces are used similarly as we now see electricity and other natural energies adapted to various purposes, there will be, quote, war in heaven. Good men will not alone possess the ability to use them. Indeed, the sort of man you now call good will not be the most able. The wicked will, however, pay liberally for the power of those who can wield such forces. And at last, the supreme masters who now guard this knowledge from children will have to come forth. Then will ensue a dreadful war in which, as has ever happened, the masters will succeed the evildoers, and the evildoers will be destroyed by the very engines, principalities, and powers prostituted to their own purposes during years of intense selfish living. But why dwell on this? In these days, it is only a prophecy. Question. Could you give some hints as to how the secrets of the elemental plane are preserved and prevented from being known? Do these guardians of whom you speak occupy themselves in checking elementals, or how? Do they see much danger of divulgement likely in those instances where elemental action is obvious to the observer? The sage says, as to whether they check elementals or not, need not be inquired into, because while that may be probable, it does not appear very necessary where men are unsuspicious of the agency causing phenomena. It's much easier to throw a cloud over the investigator's mind and lead him off to other results of often material advantage to himself, while at the same time acting as a complete preventative or switch, which turns his energies and application into different departments. It might be illustrated thus. Suppose that a number of trained occultists are set apart to watch the various sections of the world where the mental energies are in fervid operation. It is quite easy for them to see in a moment any mind that is about reaching a clue to the elemental world. And besides, imagine that trained elementals themselves constantly carry information about such events. Then, by superior knowledge and command over this peculiar world, influences presenting the various pictures are sent out to that inquiring mind. In one case, it may be a new moral reform. In another, a great invention is revealed. And such is the effect that the man's whole time and mind are taken up by this new thing which he imagines is his own. Or again, it would be easy to turn his thoughts into a certain rut leading far from the dangerous clue. In fact, the methods are endless. Question, would it be wise to put into the hands of truly good and conscientious men who now use or write the gifts they have, the knowledge and control over elementals to be used on the side of right and good? The sage answers that the masters are the judges of what good men are to have this power and control. One should not forget that you cannot be sure of the character at the bottom of those whom you call truly good and conscientious men. Place them in the fire of the tremendous temptation which such power and control would furnish, and most of them would fail. But the masters already know the character of all who in any way approach to a knowledge of these forces, and they always judge whether such a man is to be aided or prevented. They are not working to make these laws and forces known, but they work to establish right doctrine, right speech, and right action, so that the characters and motives of men shall undergo such a radical change as to fit them for wielding power in the elemental world. And that power is not now lying idle, but is always being used by those who will never fail to use it rightly. The whole astral world is a mass of illusion. People see into it, and then through the novelty of the thing and the exclusiveness of the power, they are bewildered into thinking they actually see true things, whereas they've only just begun to remove one thin crust of the truth. So even if we were to perceive or see something, we need to keep in mind that it's just a glimpse. And next are some practical suggestions for life in consideration of elementals and what we know about them. If one wants to learn how to exercise a calming and controlling influence over elementals, the first thing to focus on is silence. A simple rule would be to talk little, if at all, during meals, and to eat calmly and gratefully. Some health problems arise not because of what people eat, but because of the way it is eaten. If one engages in like character assassination and pointless chatter during meals, it's like thinking bad thoughts while trying to assimilate food and taking in influences. So some silence is necessary for gratitude, for thinking of the persons who planted the seeds and took the trouble to raise the food, to consider the sun and the soil and the rain and all that which aided its growth. Similarly, some quiet calmness and silence as one prepares for sleep is important. Because one is preparing to enter into the dreaming state and ultimately into sushupti, the deep dreamless state, where the more one is concentrated and calm, the more easily one will enter these states and bring back the experiences one had. Many of us have a great difficulty in winding down at the end of the day, and one has to find a way to calm down so that one can enter sleep cheerfully and calmly. One must enter sleep as if one is ready to commune with the divine, to seek true refreshment and the richest spiritual privacy. One should go into sleep as if it were a very great privilege, and then come out of it with as much gratitude and quiet alertness as possible. And that's why calmness and silence is also important upon awakening. And this calmness should be internal as well as external. It's also good to remain calm when dispatching one's affairs and keeping some order in one's physical space. It's better to spend half an hour getting organized and 3 hours working than to spend all of one's time working and not 1 second getting organized or cleaning up afterwards. One shows gratitude to the elementals, which have made it possible to accomplish something by being calm and organized. But most people leave messes after themselves and do not even thank those who come along and clean up later. And this entails a lack of gratitude. And in order for one to become as one of nature's co-workers, one has to work like nature works. and that's to prepare and silence. Treat objects with respect. Treat the elementals with which we are entrusted with their care and sort of development, because we're raising up all of matter. And such habits of mind and body reflect the natural order. One should not be fearful, because one should remember that there is nothing stronger on earth than the power of concentrated benevolence. And there is nothing more beautiful than a man or a woman who casts no shadow and leaves no footprints. That's why the light on the path says that one must learn to observe sensation and learn from it the true laws of life. Then one can set one's foot on the first rung of the ladder of discipleship. If one can do this, return to the fundamentals of the philosophy, go back to the ABCs, and set one's foot on the first step of the ladder, one will attract cheerful, helpful learning elementals. And there are plenty of them, but they won't be attracted unless one is childlike, grateful, and wide-eyed. The voice of the silence admonishes us to regain the child state we have lost. Because if one doesn't do what one says, cheerful, helpful learning elementals will be repelled. So one has to be like, have integrity and follow through. Elementals are characterized by fidelity to some extent, but at the same time, chaste and pure, and they can never be attracted to someone who is anxious, agitated, or unfaithful. There's no getting away from the basics: honesty, chastity of thought, feeling, conduct, compassion, unconditional love, integrity, and courage, the classic virtues. So long as those qualities are present, vast numbers of learning elementals will be attracted. And whether we are aware of it or not, every exertion of our psyche, every thought, feeling, word, and breath attracts and repels specific classes of elementals. Every action charges and magnetizes them with a vibration. And one could compare this to a musical instrument. If the vibration is clear and pure, it will resonate on another instrument nearby. It is said that the number of elementals impressed by even seemingly trivial thoughts is surprisingly vast. And once they have been impressed, they can either lodge in one's vestures for a time or move on. And they are really moving under certain infallible laws of attraction and repulsion, or magnetism. And these laws are integral aspects of the universal forces of attraction and repulsion, and ultimately are the most fundamental laws of evolution and existence. So by practicing in such ways, we can learn to charge our magnetism beneficially. When one takes on a task with concentration and seriousness, one attracts refined grades of elementals. But if one is vacillating, weak-willed, or contradictory, less refined elementals are drawn to one. So the idea of turn to the deity within and shut the doors to the passions without. Open one's eyes to the stars, our ears to the music of the spheres, and our hearts to the pulse of humanity. Then with calmness and quietude, walk in a new direction. Fundamentally, one must learn to see the universal in the common and the invisible in the visible. And this means that understanding that there's nothing more powerful than the self of all, the Paramatman, the highest self. Lastly, we must remember that the mind of man is capable of bringing about results through thought and attraction and repulsion. So if we get discouraged and we think that nothing can be done, our mind meets other minds within the radius of our sphere that also think, well, nothing can be done. So of course, nothing is done. But if we remain unselfish and earnestly think of theosophy and desire that others should be benefited by it, then we meet with like minds in stray moments of the day, and the result will be an awakening of interest. And we'll finally end with a quote from the Voice of the Silence. If thou wouldst not be slain by them, then must thou harmless make thy own creations, the children of thy thoughts, unseen, impalpable, that swarm round humankind, the progeny and heirs to man and his terrestrial spoils. Thou hast to study the voidness of the seeming full, the fullness of the seeming void. O fearless aspirant, look deep within the well of thine own heart and answer, knowest thou of self the powers, O thou perceiver of external shadows? So with that, we'll conclude and open it up for questions and comments about elementals. Yeah.
Yeah, that is I guess that's the start of, if there's any start of our behavior, our thinking. And I was thinking about on the material level, we come up with, we have material that's there to build a building, but it's really at a more basic level than material, because it's the material it's made of. So the elemental is the start of everything, and then we mold it based on our thinking.
Yeah, that's right. And even the material, is made up of atoms, but there are elementals associated with physical objects, because they're not really, we think of them as inanimate, but as they're exchanging atoms and they've been impressed by the intention of the people making the products or the intention of what they're going to be used for. There's elementals associated with all aspects of manifestation. So for sure, taking a minute to, some time, more than a minute, think about how what would be the sort of impression we give is a good place to start. What we express, what kinds of elementals, how they might be impressed by, impressed like impressions, how they might be impressed by our thought, our motive, our conduct, our manner. And this goes back to just the very fundamentals of like our intention and how we conduct ourselves from day to day. And it's a lot to think about, but one could start with very basic things like the calmness and gratitude when eating. That's a pretty simple thing that requires no special commotion. One can just start with small things, like if you're trying to take in, assimilate food or take in new information, to be like quiet, intentional, cheerful. Certainly, maybe one can't avoid talking with the family while eating, but as it said, you don't have to say negative things about other people, because we know, like Mr. Judges said, that when one does that, the elemental want to, even if it's true, a negative thing about another person, some of that comes back to roost in you. So just very basic things we could start with. But yeah, how we use objects, do we like toss stuff aside, taking care of things? We're literally raising up matter, so we're like training it through our actions and through our thoughts. And we want to, everything's on loan to us, so to speak. We're trustees as humans. We're at the height, the apex of the ladder, on this sphere. There's room to go beyond it, to become like a god, like an adept. But basically we should be impressing the lives below us, the elementals, the mineral, the plant, the animal kingdoms, with beneficial impressions.
It depends. It seems to me like you said we the people, we are the ones that have the self-induced and self-devised methods that we have to do. So we use the elementals the way we think. The way we think and so forth. But the animals, especially the lower animals, they are influenced by nature. So they don't have as much to say about use of elementals. I guess the higher animals would maybe start to, like the elephants and stuff like that, and the dogs and the cats and so forth.
Yeah, they act mostly by instinct and, affected by their environment, which we may have a role in as human beings. But yeah, they use, unconsciously, they're using elementals too, attracting and impressing elementals by any thought or bodily motion. So anything physical or mental is going to, impress elementals. So the animal kingdom does as well, but we can surmise that even if they perform some so-called selfish action, it's within their instinct and their survival, and because they're not reflective consciousness, they can't be held, accountable for that. And it's also said that the animals take on the elements and the principles from, people, to the extent that they take the cast off clothes, the matter, the elementals that we've impressed go to make up the animal kingdom and so forth. So they are affected by us. And the more we live rightly, as it suggested, the more we'll aid the whole, the other kingdoms.
So, Kathy, really good overview on elementals. So you mentioned that the masters or perfected beings can use elementals for the benefit of others. So, maybe in a small way, every time we pick up a book of devotion and read and meditate deeply, we are perhaps also sending out a training unconsciously. I mean, a master would train an element consciously, right? It would be, we could do it consciously. Can you assume that every time you pick up a book of devotion, maybe a few times a day, whenever you can, and meditate deeply, we are subconsciously training elementals to perhaps impact someone else who's also thinking along the same lines?
Yes, absolutely. So, even if you don't have direct contact with other people, just by impressing the elementals that are similarly attracted to another person doing a similar thing, thinking along the same lines, they are impacted. And I think that's why Judge and HPB are like, you don't have to go out and necessarily do some particular thing to be a good theosophist. It's about how you conduct your life with whoever's around you, whatever's around you. It's just how you live basically from day to day that, you know, and of course you said theosophy first and theosophy last. Like you said, if you connect with that multiple times a day, it would be great. And to think of others, because we're one human family, that brotherhood. Yeah. It becomes a factor for karma too, to help ourselves and others, you know, collectively. Sorry, go ahead.
The other question is, when someone dies out of the body, the astral part along with the desires go into the kamalokic state, right? Can that also influence elementals at that stage, or is it you have to be embodied to really be able to influence an elemental?
There's actually an article about elementals and elementaries that I need to like refresh my memory on. But I mean, the passions and so forth that go into Kamaloka are sort of represent actions that we've already taken. But yeah, those are there are elementals associated with those. And if they become, you know, attracted magnetically to an elementary, like the deceased shell, then that we could say that that happened as a result of the thoughts and impressions, you know, we peopled in our desires. So we are, yeah, that is our karma. That is if our elementals, our principles, yeah, because we impress them and they can't help where they're magnetically attracted in this sphere while it decomposes, while the ego's in Devachan getting rest. Yeah, for sure, that is part of our karmic legacy. We have to answer for that in some manner, because that elementary could influence someone else, the living in some way. So there's multiple ways that elementals are a factor in our karma and how it affects others.
Well, it's very comprehensive. I thought it was very comprehensive. One wonderful talk. When you submit the write-up, very brief write-up, if you can do it, it's a lot of information. Put in some sources for further research, maybe from the secret doctrine, or whatever his sources were. It would be helpful to think for all of us.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't do slides because I could have put some quotes, but I looked at like diagrams, and some like looked like theosophy diagrams, but I didn't recognize them from secret doctrine. I didn't want to like put things I wasn't sure where they really came from.
It's something that would be, you know, it's just something that the standard stuff that we would root. I just do the secret doctrine. That's so easy to. But any of the theosophical literature. Well, thank you very much. Is there anything else, speakers, that you want to?
I'll take a break and return for Patanjali.
A good idea.
Sounds good.
We're about 12:10, 12. Does that give us enough time? Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Sure. Thank you.
Oh, by the way, while I got you on here, now I guess